The galaxy had always believed itself to be ancient, wise, and above all, safe. For thousands of cycles, civilizations rose and fell under the watchful authority of the Galactic Council, an alliance forged after the last Great War, a conflict so devastating that it nearly erased intelligent life from entire sectors. That war had ended not with victory, but with exhaustion. Since then, conflict had been outlawed, aggression suppressed, and entire species guided toward peaceful coexistence. War, they believed, was a flaw of the past, something lesser beings once clung to before they evolved beyond it. So when the blue-green world designated Earth was discovered on the fringes of explored space, it barely registered as significant. A young planet, a developing species, no unified government, no interstellar presence. Primitive. Still, protocol demanded observation. The first reports were unremarkable. Humans were physically unimpressive compared to many galactic species. They lacked natural armor, claws, venom, or enhanced sensory organs. Their lifespans were short, their environment unpredictable, and yet, something about them felt inconsistent. Their history logs were the first red flag. Unlike most species, whose early records showed gradual cooperation and societal unification, human history was chaotic, fragmented by endless wars, revolutions, and violent conflicts. Entire nations had risen and fallen in cycles of destruction and rebirth. Weapons had evolved rapidly, from crude blades to planet-threatening arsenals in a fraction of the time it took other species to invent basic spaceflight. At first, the Council dismissed it as instability. An undeveloped species, one elder remarked. They will outgrow it. But deeper analysis told a different story. Humans did not outgrow conflict. They refined it. Archived battle simulations, reconstructed from human data, revealed something deeply unsettling. When placed under pressure, when resources were scarce, environments hostile, or survival uncertain, humans didn't collapse. They adapted. Rapidly. Strategies evolved within hours. Tactics shifted mid-engagement. Individuals learned from failure at a rate that defied standard biological models. One observer summarized it with visible unease. They do not simply react to danger. They improve because of it. That statement alone was enough to trigger a higher-level investigation. The Council authorized a full biological and psychological study. The results were troubling. Human physiology was inefficient by peaceful standards. Their bodies consumed high energy, required constant maintenance, and were prone to damage. But beneath that inefficiency was something else: redundancy. Layered systems designed not for optimal living, but for survival under extreme stress. Bones that could endure heavy impact. Muscles capable of explosive bursts of strength. A nervous system wired to override pain when necessary. Even their brains showed anomalies. Humans possessed an unusual ability to recognize patterns in chaos, predicting movement, anticipating threats, and reacting before conscious thought fully formed. Instincts that mirrored those of apex predators. But humans weren't predators. Not in the traditional sense. They lacked natural weapons. They built them. And that, the Council realized, was far more dangerous. Still, none of it explained the deeper irregularities. So they searched further. Buried beneath centuries of human data, hidden behind layers of encryption and forgotten archives, they found something unusual: files that had been deliberately erased. Not destroyed. Hidden. Recovered fragments revealed incomplete research logs, genetic studies, and classified experiments from humanity's early technological age. Most of it was corrupted, but one file remained partially intact. A message. No origin. No author. No timestamp. Just a sequence of translated text. The council chamber fell silent as the words were decoded, displayed across the central interface. 5 simple words. 5 words that no one in the galaxy was prepared to read. We did not evolve naturally. No one spoke. No one moved. Because in that moment, for the first time in thousands of cycles, the Galactic Council felt something it had long believed extinct. Fear. And far away, on a quiet blue world, humanity continued its ordinary existence, unaware that the stars themselves had just begun to tremble. The chamber remained silent long after the message faded from the central display. No one wanted to be the first to speak. For thousands of cycles, the Galactic Council had operated under a single, unshakable truth. Life evolved naturally. It adapted, it struggled, it survived, but always within the boundaries of predictable biological progression. What they had just read broke that truth. We did not evolve naturally. The phrase echoed through every mind in the chamber. At last, Councillor Viral, one of the oldest members, broke the silence. Verify authenticity. The command triggered a cascade of analysis. The fragment was dissected, cross-referenced, and tested against known data. Linguistic patterns matched early human dialects. The encoding method aligned with primitive but deliberate obfuscation techniques. It was real, and that made it worse. Continue recovery, Viral ordered. More fragments were extracted from the corrupted archive, each incomplete, each damaged by time. But together, they began to form a pattern. The message was not a statement. It was a warning. The next fragment appeared slowly, characters stabilizing as translation algorithms worked through the distortion. Intervention occurred during early development. A murmur spread across the chamber. Intervention, another counselor whispered. By whom? There was no answer, only more data. Genetic scans of humanity were rerun with new parameters. This time, they weren't searching for evolutionary anomalies. They were searching for design. What they found made several observers request immediate psychological stabilization. Human DNA contained sequences that did not belong. Not mutations. Insertions. Perfectly structured segments embedded within otherwise chaotic genetic code. These sequences did not degrade over time. They remained stable across generations, preserved with unnatural precision. Artificial, one scientist confirmed, his voice strained. Purpose. Viral demanded. The answer came in the form of cascading data streams. Pain tolerance markers, elevated far beyond survival necessity. Adrenal response systems, capable of pushing the body to destructive limits without immediate shutdown. Neural enhancements, favoring rapid decision-making under stress, particularly in unpredictable environments. And most disturbing of all, adaptive aggression. Humans did not simply respond to threats. They learned from them. Every conflict refined their instincts. Every encounter reshaped their behavior. They became more efficient with each challenge. That is not evolution, a council biologist said quietly. That is optimization. The word hung heavily in the air. Optimization implied intent. Design implied purpose. And purpose demanded a creator. Another fragment stabilized on the display. We built them to endure what we could not. This time, no one spoke at all. The implications were too vast, too dangerous. A species built, not to thrive in peace, but to survive in extremes, to endure suffering, to adapt under pressure, to fight when others could not. The Council began cross-referencing ancient galactic records, searching for any civilization capable of such an act. Most results returned nothing. Extinct species, lost empires, scattered remnants of forgotten histories. But one pattern emerged, a recurring anomaly in distant sectors, worlds that showed signs of sudden collapse, civilizations that had reached advanced stages of development, only to vanish without trace. No war debris, no environmental catastrophe, just silence. Could they be connected? One counselor asked. Viral did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied the data, his ancient mind processing possibilities that none of the others dared to consider. If a species faced extinction, he said slowly, and lacked the strength to survive, they might create something that could. A weapon, not of metal or energy, but of flesh, living, learning, evolving. A final fragment emerged from the archive, its signal weak, barely intact. Translation took longer this time. The chamber lights dimmed as power was redirected to stabilize the data. And then, at last, the words appeared. They will not know what they are, until it is too late. The display flickered, then went dark. No further data could be recovered. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier, colder, because now the Council understood something far worse than the truth. Humanity was not dangerous because of what it had done. Humanity was dangerous because of what it had been made to become. And somewhere, on a distant blue world, billions of humans lived their lives, unaware that within them lay something ancient, something deliberate, something waiting for the moment it would be needed, waiting to awaken. The Galactic Council did not believe in fear. Fear was an instinct of lesser beings, an evolutionary flaw that clouded judgment and led to irrational decisions. For thousands of cycles, they had governed with logic, data, and certainty. But now, certainty was gone. The fragments had revealed enough to raise questions, but not enough to confirm them. Humanity might be engineered. It might be designed for conflict. Or it might simply be a coincidence, a chaotic species shaped by an unusually violent history. The Council needed proof. So they turned to the one thing they trusted above all else. Simulation. A controlled environment was constructed, a hostile world modeled after one of the galaxy's deadliest ecosystems. Atmospheric instability, aggressive predator species, limited resources, unpredictable terrain. No civilization had ever survived there unaided. Into this environment, they placed a single subject, a human, designated Subject H1. No advanced tools, no external support, minimal supplies. The parameters were simple. Observe, record, understand. Initial projections estimated a 3.2% chance of survival beyond the first cycle. The simulation began. At first, everything followed expectations. The humans struggled. Environmental conditions were harsh. Toxic air pockets forced constant relocation. Native predators hunted relentlessly, testing the humans' limits within hours of arrival. Subject H1 was injured within the first day. The Council noted it with quiet approval. Termination within acceptable range, one analyst remarked. But the human did not die. Instead, something unexpected happened. It learned. The subject began identifying patterns, tracking predator movement, mapping safe zones, recognizing environmental shifts. Injuries were not repeated. Mistakes were not made twice. By the third cycle, the human had constructed basic tools from available materials. By the fifth, it had created shelter. By the seventh, it was hunting. The council grew silent as the data streamed in. "This is accelerated adaptation," one scientist said, unable to hide the tension in their voice. "No," another corrected. "This is strategic evolution in real time." The distinction mattered. Evolution took generations. This was happening within days. Subject H1 was no longer reacting to the environment. It was reshaping its relationship with it. Predators that once hunted the human began to avoid it. Those that didn't disappeared. The subject studied them, learned their behaviors, then exploited them. Ambushes replaced evasion. Tools became weapons. The ecosystem itself was turned into an advantage, terrain used to trap, isolate, and eliminate threats. The council adjusted the simulation. New variables were introduced. More aggressive predators. Environmental hazards intensified. The human adapted again. Faster this time. Always faster. What is driving this rate of improvement? Viral demanded. No one had an answer, because the data showed something unprecedented. The human was not just learning from experience. It was anticipating it. Behavioral models indicated predictive decision-making, choices made not based on immediate conditions, but on expected outcomes. The subject was thinking ahead, planning, strategizing, like a commander on a battlefield. By the 14th cycle, Subject H1 had become the dominant force within the simulation zone. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the most dangerous, because it understood its environment better than anything else within it, and it used that understanding without hesitation. The final phase of the simulation was initiated. Multiple threats deployed simultaneously. A scenario designed to overwhelm, to break the subject, to prove limits. For the first time since the simulation began, the human was pushed to its edge. Surrounded, outnumbered, outmatched. The council leaned forward, watching closely. "This is where it ends," one observer said. But it didn't. The human did not panic, did not flee. Instead, it changed. Biometric readings spiked. Heart rate increased. Neural activity surged beyond previously recorded thresholds. Pain signals were suppressed. Focus intensified. The subject moved with precision, every action deliberate, every decision efficient. It did not fight to survive. It fought to win. Within hours, the threats were gone, neutralized, eliminated. The simulation continued running, but there was nothing left to challenge the human. Silence filled the chamber. The data was undeniable. Finally, Viral spoke. "Terminate the simulation." "Reason?" an analyst asked. Viral's gaze remained fixed on the display, where the human now stood alone, calm, alert, waiting. "Because," he said quietly, "we are no longer observing survival." He paused. "We are observing something far more dangerous." The system shut down. But the conclusion remained. In any environment, under any conditions, given enough time, humans did not just survive. They took control. The simulation ended, but its consequences did not. Across the Galactic Council, panic spread, not openly, not chaotically, but in quiet, controlled fractures. Emergency sessions were called. Data was reanalyzed. Every conclusion was questioned, then confirmed, and confirmed again. There was no error, no miscalculation. Only one truth remained. Humanity was not a normal species. They are a latent threat, one counselor stated during the emergency assembly, not because they choose conflict, but because they are built for it. The chamber erupted into debate. Then we contain them. Containment is impossible. They have already begun early-stage expansion. Then we isolate their system, quarantine it. And when they discover the quarantine, what then? Silence followed, because they all knew the answer. Humans would not accept confinement. They would challenge it, study it, break it, and once they did, they would learn. Viral stood slowly, his presence commanding immediate attention. "We are asking the wrong question," he said. "This is not about what humanity is now." He paused, letting his words settle. "It is about what they will become." That was the true danger. Not the present, the future. Humanity had not yet reached its full potential. It was still divided, still unaware of its origins, still restrained by internal conflict and limited technology. But the simulation had proven something undeniable. Under pressure, humans evolved faster than any known species, and the galaxy itself was full of pressure. The decision was made to uncover the final truth. If humanity had been created, then somewhere in the ruins of the past, there had to be evidence of its creators. Ancient archives were opened, restricted sectors accessed for the first time in millennia. Forgotten star systems were scanned. Dead worlds were re-examined. And eventually, they found it. A planet, long lifeless, orbiting a dying star at the edge of known space. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, another extinct civilization lost to time. But beneath its surface, buried under layers of decay, were structures, facilities, laboratories, and within them, records. The data was fragmented, heavily degraded, but enough remained to reconstruct the final days of the species that had once lived there. They had been advanced, far beyond even the current Galactic Council, but they had faced something worse than extinction. They had faced an enemy they could not defeat. Details were scarce, references to an overwhelming force, an unstoppable threat. Entire fleets destroyed, planets consumed, defenses rendered useless. They had tried everything: weapons, alliances, even self-modification. Nothing worked, so they made a final decision. Not to fight, but to create something that could. Genetic blueprints filled the recovered data, design schematics for a species built from the ground up. Adaptability prioritized above all else. Survival mechanisms layered into every system. Cognitive functions tuned for rapid learning under stress. A species that would not break. A species that would endure. A species that would fight, forever if necessary. The Council watched the reconstructed logs in silence. They weren't building a civilization, one scientist whispered. They were building a weapon. And then they saw it. The final record. A message, recorded by one of the creators, their form distorted by damage, their voice barely stable through translation. "We have failed," the being said. "We cannot stop them, but our creation might." The recording flickered. "They will not understand what they are. They will grow. They will evolve. And one day, they will face what we could not." A pause. Then the final words. "If they awaken in time, they may survive." The transmission ended. The facility fell silent, and the Council finally understood. Humanity was never meant to join the galaxy. It was never meant to coexist. It was meant to confront something far worse, something that had already destroyed its creators. Viral closed his eyes. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "Humanity is not the threat." He opened them again, his gaze filled with something far more unsettling than fear. "It is the answer, and somewhere, beyond the edges of explored space, something was coming." The galaxy did not have time to prepare. For all its ancient wisdom, for all its accumulated knowledge and cautious diplomacy, the Galactic Council had spent too long debating humanity, what it was, what it might become, whether it should be contained or welcomed. In the end, none of it mattered, because the First War did not begin with humanity. It began with something else. The first signal came from the outer sectors, distorted, fragmented, and filled with noise that defied standard communication patterns. Entire relay stations went silent within a single cycle. Patrol fleets dispatched to investigate vanished without distress calls. At first, the Council assumed a technical failure. Then came the visual data. A transmission recovered from a damaged probe showed something no one could identify. Massive structures moving through space, not ships in any conventional sense, but living constructs. Their surfaces shifted and rippled, absorbing energy, reshaping themselves in response to incoming fire. Weapons fired against them simply disappeared. Entire fleets engaged. Entire fleets were erased. No debris. No survivors. Only silence. Panic spread across the Council like a fracture through glass. "It's them," Viral said, his voice low as he watched the footage. "The ones that destroyed the creators." The realization came too late. Emergency mobilization was ordered. Defensive lines established. Ancient weapons, long abandoned, were reactivated in desperation. But the enemy did not slow. It adapted, just as humanity had in the simulation, but on a scale far beyond comprehension. Each engagement taught it more. Each resistance strengthened it. Planets fell within cycles. Civilizations that had endured for millennia vanished without a trace. The galaxy was not at war. It was being consumed. And then, humanity arrived. At first, it was a single signal, clear, structured, unmistakably human. A broadcast sent across open space. "We see the threat." The Council hesitated. They had not contacted humanity. They had not warned them. Yet somehow, humanity knew. More signals followed. Human vessels entering contested zones. Not retreating. Not observing. Engaging. The Council watched in stunned silence as human fleets moved with precision, coordinated, adaptive, unpredictable. Their ships were not the most advanced. Their weapons were not the most powerful. But their strategy was different. Humans did not attack blindly. They studied. They probed. They sacrificed small units to gather data, learning the enemy's patterns, testing its responses, analyzing its adaptations. And then, they changed. Mid-conflict, human tactics evolved. Energy frequencies shifted. Attack formations restructured. Weapons modified in real time. The enemy adapted. But so did humanity. Faster. Always faster. "They're learning at the same rate," one counselor said, disbelief in their voice. "No," Viral replied quietly. "They're learning faster." The turning point came in a battle over a dying star system. A human fleet, outnumbered and outmatched, faced one of the largest enemy constructs yet recorded. Initial engagement failed. Human ships were destroyed. Losses mounted. And then, something changed. The surviving human vessels altered their approach, drawing the construct toward the star, manipulating its movement, forcing it into a position it could not easily escape. A trap. The Council watched, breathless. The star destabilized under targeted assault, its surface erupting in controlled detonations. The construct attempted to adapt, to withdraw. But it was too late. The star collapsed inward, consuming everything in its gravity well, including the enemy. Silence followed. For the first time, the enemy had been destroyed. Not driven back. Not delayed. Destroyed. The transmission that followed was simple. A human voice, calm and steady. We understand it now. More signals spread across the galaxy. Human fleets mobilizing. Strategies forming. Coordination increasing. The dormant design had awakened. Not as chaos. Not as rage. But as purpose. The Council stood in silence as the truth settled over them like a shadow. Humanity had not been created to destroy the galaxy. It had been created to save it. But salvation came at a cost, because the same thing that made humanity the galaxy's only hope also made it unstoppable. Viral looked out across the stars, now filled with the light of distant battles, and for the first time he understood the final truth left behind by the creators. Humanity was not just a weapon. It was the last one. And now, it had finally been unleashed.